Good morning. Let's get started. 75 minutes always looks like a daunting long time to talk, but usually we don't have enough time, right, when we get into some of these sessions. So my name is Alan Meus. Let me switch to the other one. And looks a little stranger, but they yesterday changed the name of my group, so from Modern Devices to Windows Devices, and that's where I'm part of. I'm an architect in Microsoft Services, and I work, my daily job is to work with large enterprise customers to evaluate, at this point, Windows 10 and create the architecture to desktop deployment as well as deployment of mobile devices based on Windows and EMS or Enterprise Mobility Services that we deliver as Microsoft as a cloud service. That's what I do on a daily basis. I work closely with the Windows engineering team, obviously, because all the customers have feedback. We love to get your feedback too, right? If you're a Windows insider or someone in your organization or Windows insider, please provide us feedback and provide feedback in the eval today. Would really appreciate it on the session in general, also on what I'm going to talk about, the subject matter as such. I will be covering Windows 10, and when we entered the titles for this session, we created all these Windows 10 for mobile devices sessions. What we actually meant is sessions about the mobile version of Windows 10, which is officially called Windows 10 Mobile, right? If you have been to another Windows 10 session that covers as well desktop as mobile scenarios, you will see a lot of similarities. I'm really talking about the Windows version that many of you may know as Windows Phone 8.1 becomes Windows 10 Mobile on a phone, or Windows 10 Mobile on a small tablet like this one, right? Less than 8-inch type of tablet. This is an HP Stream 7, Atom-based, 1 gigabyte, I think. It's a small tablet, right? And it's a mobile device. That's what we mean with the OS specifically for this environment as such. The OS will have a start screen, not a start menu, right? It adapts, so to speak, or it's specific to mobile scenarios. If you want touch first, all those kind of great things that a mobile device needs. Obviously, I'm going to talk about security, and I guess everybody is trying to scare you, right? I'm scared. Well, if I work at Microsoft, I work in Washington State in the northwest of the US, and our main medical insurance provider was hacked last year in April. We heard about it this year in January. So all my medical records and social security number are somewhere on the internet, right? So everybody should be concerned in terms of cybersecurity and so forth, but there are obviously, if we work in IT, we have ability to protect the IP from our companies and the privacy of our employees, etc. So let's talk about what we can do to protect the users and the IP of our company as such. I'll talk through a number of layers. This is kind of the agenda of my talk. Layers of security that are built into the Windows operating system and that are built in, and I'll specifically focus on the mobile parts of this. But these are the elements from the bottom up, right? Secure hardware up into the cloud services over applications, access control. All those elements are basically the security architecture of the OS and enable us to set up controls to protect our users and the IP of our company. So let's start with the hardware. Who has not heard about UEFI, as I say? Who has not heard about UEFI? Nobody? All right, great. UEFI is just like in Windows 8.1, a secure implementation of the hardware. And it enables, as an application platform, to configure the device, the firmware, as well as to start a trusted operating system. If we can make sure that the firmware is not tampered with, we can boot an operating system in a secure environment on a trusted platform. Basically, that is what we are doing with UEFI on Windows devices and on mobile devices too. Every Windows phone in the market, every Windows mobile device has the requirement to have secure UEFI implemented on the device. We work with our OEMs to make sure that is actually happening. Now, this is important because it gives you the trust, if you want, right? The assertion that Windows devices are secure from a hardware perspective. We are not the only ones who are doing this, right? I believe Apple is doing the same way. Nobody really knows all the details about it, but Apple is also using this environment for a secure boot of their devices. So a secure boot process starts with a SoC, a system on a chip, that is in every phone or mobile device, and that initiates the boot loaders of the device when the user pushes the boot button, right? To turn it on as such. And the firmware in the SoC starts the UEFI environment, which is an application platform. Several applications will run in this environment. There will be applications that initiate the hardware of the device or do diagnostics and those kind of things. They can be replaced in a secure way, and they can then deliver a Windows Boot Manager, that is a component that we deliver within the SoC to initiate the Windows boot in a secure way. So we boot from the ground up in a secure way. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that booting process works. We can also boot in an update OS, specifically to update the operating system and the UEFI environment itself. We can do that through Windows Update as such. That's the second way that we can boot securely. And it's the only way to update a device, to boot in a secure Windows OS or update OS as such. If there is really a need to go in the device, there is a flashing mode, and you may see, like, for example, who's doing Windows Phone, Windows Insider on a Windows phone, right? Some of you will be downloading the, what is it called, Windows Phone Recovery Tool, correct? It will boot your device into this flashing mode, recovery mode, and enable a secure download of a signed operating system image and replace whatever OS image is on the device with a secure image. What is important is that at manufacturing, we fuse away a number of hashes of public keys that link to all kinds of things that we do on the device, and we work with our OEMs to make that a secure manufacturing process when they do that. We also provision the UEFI database, which is a complex system of keys with a master key and an exchange key database that can be updated with updates. And when that is done, the operating system has all the keys, or the UEFI environment has all the keys to check itself as well as the operating system that runs on it. There is no operating system that can run in a secure UEFI environment unless it is securely signed and the keys or the hashes of those keys are available in the UEFI itself. When there is a breach of an operating system for some reason, right, Microsoft loses keys or something, then we can replace the keys in every Windows device globally, right? That network as such. This environment is obviously standard. Anybody can use it. It's applicable to PCs as well as phones, as well as tablets, what have you. It is very widely available. We can update it, and we sign all the components that run on a device like this. The result is that The operating system runs on a trusted firmware environment, and itself is trusted through the full keychain from the early boot up as such. We do create or recheck running binaries on a phone or on a mobile device at a regular basis. During operations, we will use a cache of those checksums, but we will refresh the checksums at a regular time to make sure that everything is fine and as should be. In addition, the firmware, or the UEFI firmware, implements a TPM 2.0 TPM, a trusted element on the device in which we can store secrets and in which we can actually use to protect other secrets that may be stored on the device. Every Windows phone has a TPM. Every mobile device, even a little Stream 7 like this from HP, has a TPM. It's a $75 Windows device, right? It's implemented in the SOC with the UEFI firmware, and it protects elements on this device for BitLocker, for any signing, for authentication, etc. And I'll talk more in details about that. We do have an attestation server for TPMs and the health of the devices that runs in the Microsoft Cloud. And if you want to use it, you will have to connect to that Microsoft Cloud. And I'll talk a little bit about that in some of the next slides as such. Right, so we attestate the health of the device as well as the validity of the TPM, if it is spoofed or not, if it's a real TPM. We have the Trusted Computing Group protocols to do specifically that. Trusted Computing Group also owns a standard for the TPM 1.2 as well as 2.0. So we deliver secure hardware that is only running trusted operating system components, that is attested, that has a secure element to protect additional secrets that we need on the device to do some of the encryption and authentication that we're going to do once the operating system is actually running and the user wants to log in. Now, when the user starts the device, he will see the application layer of the operating system. And the application layer is the main component that the user interacts with. The application layer in the operating system on a mobile device is modern apps only, or Windows RT apps only, or universal Windows apps only, or whatever you want to use this name, but that are the only elements and applications that the user will interact with on the device itself, right? A Windows mobile device does not support Win32 apps at all. Only modern apps will be on those devices. Just like today, Windows Phone 8.1, right, only supports apps from the store, or modern apps, or I don't know which name you guys are using. I'm confused with the names, but for Windows 10, we'll call them Universal Windows apps. That's the name we have for these apps, right? Now, on the operating system itself, the base of it, operating system services, some of the operating system services, and as little as possible, run in the trusted computing base if you want. Nobody has access to it through an application. We'll only have access to services by calling an API. When an app installs, or when we ship the phone with an app, the app or the Windows installer will automatically install the app in a chamber, a sandbox, a container. Again, I don't know what name you want to use. We call it a chamber. And when an app installs, it has a manifest. The manifest defines what capabilities it needs. I need to be able to write a file. I need to be able to read the file, et cetera, right? Make a call, don't make a call, use location, don't use location, those kind of things, capabilities. It defines that in the manifest. The installer reads the manifest and says, these are the capabilities you need, great. I'll create you a chamber, you can run in that chamber, and those are the only capabilities you can have. If you try to call another capability in this app, you won't have it, right? It only gives the chamber those capabilities that the app actually needs defined in the manifest of those apps. That is the same for our own apps, as well as for third-party apps from the store, as well as for line of business apps that you may be developing for your organization privately. It creates a least privilege chamber. It means you can't elevate privileges in that chamber. You can't change the privileges at all. The only way to change the privileges is by doing an upgrade with a new manifest, and then the installer will actually create a new chamber and bring over any data from the previous version of your app in the new chamber, and the app will have new privileges as such. The old chamber will be removed from the device. What's important about this is because all these apps run in their own sandbox, right? They can only talk to each other through the operating system, not directly by calling another app somewhere that may be running in the OS. They can't elevate their privileges, which means that they can't do what malware wants to do, which is elevate privileges and go and do something the user isn't aware of as such. We do check all this in the store as best as possible, automated as well by user checks of applications. It's not perfect, our checks, our process, right? But it's pretty good until now. In the operating system, we will include applications, right? Pre-install applications if you want. And all these applications are pre-installed, except Skype for Business. I put, but it's also a modern app. But also the settings, right, are applications in Windows 10 or universal Windows applications on the device. Outlook, what have you, Word, Excel, those kind of things, people, all those tiles and apps that the user interacts with on the phone are all Windows universal apps. The browser, which we now call Windows Edge, right, no longer Project Spartan, is a modern app, is a Windows universal app. What's important about this is we can update apps, give new functionality to the device without having to go through the mobile operator to update the operating system, right? There's a lot of events that we have in the operating system that is now part of apps running in these least privilege boxes that we can update remotely. So we can add more functionality to the operating system as we go. This is what we call Windows as a service. We'll also be able to update the core OS on Windows mobile devices directly from Windows Update in this manner. If you have any questions, just shout out, right? So the Windows operating system delivers this application platform with sandboxed application, least privilege. We can update a lot of this from a single source from the Windows update environment and deliver new functionality to our users for desktops as well as from Windows mobile devices. Now, the next step is, of course, that you want to protect the way users access this phone as well as the applications and the services that these devices connect to. Means authentication, device unlock, those kind of things, VPN, etc. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing in Windows 10 to make that a better environment. Who has heard about Microsoft Passport? A few. Yeah, we're talking more about it, I think. Most Windows 10 sessions. You have a question?
Yeah, so will operating updates still have to go through the carrier process like they do today?
Well, how can I answer that? We'll have more capabilities to update your operating system directly from Microsoft. So updates will be available much quicker than in the past.
I keep hearing that, like Windows Phone 7, they said that, 8, they said
No, I know. Yes, and we as Microsoft have been working on that process too, and we're making a lot of progress with mobile operators. And you'll get more details pretty soon on that, right? So it'll get a lot better with Windows 10. And I know it's a pain for many of you, right? But, and for me too, actually. So access control. There's a lot of challenges with identity. Passwords, complex passwords, users don't like it. They want easy ways to access the device and unlock the device. There is big trouble in the enterprise when it comes to live IDs or MSAs, right? As we're calling them these days, because they're basically unmanageable from an enterprise perspective, and they're required in Windows 8.1, Windows Phone 8.1, right? And obviously, when users are logging in and doing stuff, you want to have better visibility onto what they are doing and when they are doing it, on what device they are logging in, and those kind of things. So big challenges in this world. The first thing we want to enable is what we call Windows Hello, right? I'm not sure how I pronounce that, but Windows Hello, I suppose. Windows Hello is basically biometrics on a mobile device. Fingerprints, face recognition, iris. If you went to the first day keynote, you saw that Joe Belfiore did a login on a desktop, I think it was, right, where he walked towards the device, and the device saw him coming, recognized his face, and logged him into the device automatically as such. Scenarios like this will require new devices. There are no devices on the market today that will support this very well at this point in time. Face recognition, for example, right? Because they don't have the infrared to make sure there is actually a living body in front of the device, and don't have the 3D vision to recognize faces. So there will be new devices that will have that type of thing, as well as new devices that will have fingerprint login, those kind of things from a mobility perspective. Exists already on the desktop, but from a mobility perspective. We're working a lot on the false acceptance rate and rejection rate. You don't want rejection rates, and you want acceptance rate to be as high as possible if you want, right? So that users have a great experience. Obviously, we still support and continue to support just PIN, numeric PIN as alphanumeric passwords. This is the way users unlock the device. This is the way users unlock their secrets, right? If you want a really secret, or you live in a really secret corporate environment, you probably want alphanumeric passwords on the device, but your users won't like it. It's a balance, right, in this sense. All this is managed by MDM. And you have a question, sir?
Will there be devices available at launch that will support potentially, or is this 6 months from us out to launch?
Well, we are planning devices to have these available at launch. I'm not sure when launch will be, but it will be at launch, yes. Right? Do you have an idea when launch will be? Yes, no, I'm guessing around the launch date myself. So, yes. But anyway, Windows Hello and PIN and passwords are MDM managed, right? So you can, if the user has a bring your own device, and they have at launch a new device, right, that supports it, and they have implemented, I don't know, face recognition to unlock their phone, and you don't like it, you can change it to a PIN if you enroll the device in your corporate environment, right, with a BYOD. Or if it's a corporate liable device, you can define the device unlock any way you want, with passwords, PIN, or face, or iris, or fingerprint.
Will that only possible with Intune or with other MDMs?
Yes. So it will be possible with Windows Intune, or sorry, it's no longer Windows Intune, right? It's Microsoft Intune, and as well as with other MDMs like AirWatch, MobileIron, Citrix, and a large number of them. So they're all working closely with us to implement these types of policies, as well as implement what we call Microsoft Passport. Microsoft Passport replaces passwords, right? Because passwords are basically the weak key. They're on sticker notes. There are 1111 passwords. There are all kinds of passwords that just don't work. And then there are a ton of stolen passwords out there, right? Because passwords not only live with the user, they also live with a server or an application that the user is logging into. So there's a lot of passwords being exchanged over networks, and they are very often weak, and that's the weak spot for passwords. What we do with Passport is we replace passwords with a key pair. The key pair is generated the moment the device or the user generates a trust with an identity provider, and I'll talk through the process in a minute, right? The key pair is generated, the private key is always on the device and never leaves the device. It's never shared with anyone, only on the device the user is using. The user only shares his public key with the identity provider, and the identity provider is using this mechanism, like in a PKI environment, to authenticate the user using encryption, right? Back and forth to authenticate the user. And I'll talk a little bit more about the details of how that works as such. The user will only have one PIN on a mobile device, or one password, or one hello motion to unlock the device and be able to log into a service. We are not creating a situation whereby a user will have to use two pins, one for corporate and one for personal. Right? The device is unlocked, the user gets access. The user can have multiple identities on the device, a personal MSA, for example, and a corporate Azure Active Directory identity on the device. They will be separated from each other in the identity store, right? But he can have multiple identities on the device. You can have multiple personal identities. You can only have one corporate identity on a device. But they will both be unlocked, or all will be unlocked with one hello motion, if you want, or PIN. There will be multiple identity providers, not just Microsoft. We have obviously AD and Azure AD, right? And we have MSA, which is also an identity provider that uses password today on Windows 10. But Google will be there too with an identity provider, and probably Facebook and Twitter and others, right? Because it's based on FIDO. It's a standard. Everybody's working together on this to enable a single protocol and process to identify people and do away with passwords. Because all these big internet companies, right, have a big problem with passwords. Everybody has a problem with it. And so we're trying to solve it all together. Of course. Absolutely. We have it already today. You will be able to remotely lock a device. You will be able to remotely block it from when it's getting stolen from being reset. You will be able to do an enterprise wipe only, right? So remove the stuff, your stuff, from a bring your own device. You will be able to remotely wipe the full device as such. And the device will auto wipe if you set the policy to auto wipe, right, after entering so many wrong passwords, if you want, or device unlocks, Windows hellos. I need to scratch passwords out of my vocabulary, but, right? So in this process, we do health attestation of the device, as well as making sure that the device or the user is actually who he is. So let's talk a little bit through it. This works the same for organizational as for personal, right? And I'm talking about IDPs, meaning Azure Active Directory, Microsoft accounts, or other cloud-based IDPs. I'm not talking about Active Directory, which is a little different here. In all this set, I'm talking about key pairs. If your company is standardized and has a solid PKI infrastructure and wants to do authentication with certificates, and many of you do, well, you can use certificates instead of key pairs, right? The mechanism, as you will, is very similar, but it works both with certificates and key pairs. The infrastructure requirements are obviously a little different. You need a PKI infrastructure, and depending if you're cloud only or on-premise only or hybrid, the setup of the infrastructure will be a little different. So the user will authenticate against a, let's call it a modern FIDO-based IDP, an identity provider, and will prove his identity. If I do this, and I do this with my live account, right? With a new Windows phone, I'm using password, but I'm using my old live account, email address plus password for my live account to authenticate myself against this IDP. If I set up two-step authentication with Live ID or MSA, right? I can use an app, or I can use a text message, or what have you, a second email account to do the additional authentication. If you do this in a corporate environment with Azure AD, you can do the same thing. Ask the user to enroll with his corporate credentials, AD credentials, let's call them that way, username and password, and then do an additional layer. Call the user and have them enter a PIN with a phone factor, for example, or provide the user with a single PIN that through another mechanism that they will need to do as an additional proof of who they are when they enable trust between a device and this identity provider. Once this trust is being created, there are two keys, a private key, a public key. Everybody can see the public key. The private key stays on the device. And now the user can authenticate against this identity provider in the future. Once that happens, the identity provider will also provide a authentication token to the device. Yes, you are who you are. You have proven that. And this authentication token is binded to the device, right? It is protected with a TPM again, so that the user can now use this authentication token and go to third-party relying third parties. A SharePoint server, an Exchange server, a web application, what have you, that trusts the IDP. It uses this authentication token to authenticate against the server or application, and gets from that service or application an access token, and you can configure this, again, MDM, to expire, right? The access token is good for 7 hours. The access token is good for 2 weeks, whatever time you want to set. So it expires at a certain point, and the user needs to go back and re-authenticate with the service so that you can set up seamless authentication for the users, but still have control over how often and et cetera they do this. So in a bring your own situation versus a corporate liable situation, the device will be activated for bring your own with an MSA, right? When it's a Windows device with a Microsoft Live account, that is also passport based. The user comes in, you provide them the login information. I will talk about how you provide that to the user to activate this device against an Azure Active Directory, right? The two identities will be on the device. There will be a trust between the device and the Active Directory, and the user can now sign in across a number of applications. The user's settings, right? And what I mean with settings is like, what color is the start screen? How is the start screen layout? What are the favorites in his browser? Those kind of things will roam over the public MSA cloud for this user when it's a bring your own scenario, right? When the device is activated with a corporate identity, these settings will roam over Azure and be on the business cloud, not the consumer cloud. Of course, you can disable roaming of settings with an MDM system, but that's the difference. The one that authenticates will use will be roaming the settings. Other cloud services like Store will also be dependent on the device enrollment, if you want, right? The user enrollment. The user will be able, on a bring your own, to buy applications directly from the Windows Store. If the user is authenticated or used with the Org ID or the Azure ID, they will be able to buy or download applications with that ID. And I'll talk about that in some of the next slides. So I'm going to discard these. This is my Azure subscription. I have a ton of directories with VMs and stuff like that, but I create one service just with my alias that has a Active Directory, right? It's an Azure Active Directory. It doesn't synchronize with the DC on-prem or nothing. I have a limited set of users in there. One is Augusto. Augusto is actually the user of this device, right? The Augusto user. And I changed his password. What did I change his password to? I think I know. And you don't see anything at this point, right? I'm entering a password. Miracast. Yes. Oh, it's not connected. It was before, so there it is. Let's hope magic happens. There it is, right? So this is my Stream 7. I'm in the settings menu. I go into systems here, right? Hopefully. Oh, there it is, starts to work. Doesn't start to work. I don't have a mouse and a keyboard connected, so I was going to show you that if I go into systems, right, on the left top corner, you could see that Augusto here is the user, right? He has a device enrolled, and maybe it's starting to work in a minute. And let's go back to my PC then. I think it's 7. Surface here. Right, we have the user Augusto. He has devices enrolled. You see this is in preview. It's actually Active Directory registration, right? It's the Stream 7 on Windows 10. That doesn't work. And I can follow his activity. If I have Azure Active Directory Premium installed, I can go into this device and get more information, but apparently not, right? But you see that it is enrolled. If I go to my MDM system here, I have the same Active Directory connected Intune instance. And this is an MDM environment, right? I have Augusto here. And let's re-authenticate. I have Augusto here as a user, right? He's a managed user. He has a device, the same device. I was registered in AD, right? It's still the Stream 7 on, and I can see the properties of the device here in more detail because the MDM enrollment sets all the policies, creates the environment for the user, et cetera, right? If there will be alerts, EDP alerts and so forth that I'll talk about, they would be here. And obviously I can see what hardware there is, what apps he is running, and he hasn't installed any apps, and what policies are applied, just a password policy. That's all I set on this device. So my Azure Active Directory enrollment of this device automatically kicks off an MDM enrollment, right? If you don't have an MDM enroll, it won't happen. There will be basic 5 policies like a PIN and a few others that will be available. You can set in Azure Active Directory, but usually Active Directory will kick off an MDM session and an MDM enrollment for the user, and you will be able to configure the device properly with all the policies, apply new applications, et cetera, to the device. Now, getting the user to enroll in a bring your own as well as in a corporate liable environment into an Azure Active Directory, right, can also be automated. It can be automated by using provisioning packages. Who knows what the ADK is? Right, if you're in desktop deployment, you have probably downloaded the ADK, but you can download the ADK today for Windows 10, and it syncs with the version, right? If you're doing Windows 10 174, which is the public Windows Insider build that you can download today, you download the ADK for the same version. You can download it from dev.microsoft.com, the tool set for Windows 10. And one of them is the Windows Image and Configuration Designer. It's a tool that enables you to create a predefined configuration. You can also use it for desktops to create images now. But if you create a configuration, as you can see, you can distribute certificates, etc., all the kinds of policies. You can automatically enroll, and there will be more policies as the builds go further and more configuration providers in the operating system become available. You can set all this environment for the user and create a single package. That single package you can distribute to the user from an internal web server. It's a package, and the device will recognize it as a provisioning package that can automatically enroll the user in AD. He will still have to prove who he is, obviously, right, with his identity. It will enroll the user in Azure AD. It will enroll the user in MDM. It will set basic policies. You can configure or add applications as well as content, documents, for example, or a database that you want to have on a mobile device without having to sync first over the wire, so that it's already there for applications that you are using, those kind of things. You can do a lot of things and kick off this enrollment. You can do this by sending the enrollment packets in email. It's probably the best method and the method that most of you are going to be using, right? Or you can do this by sending it out over an NFC tag, so the user touches, it comes in with it, bring your own device, touches an NFC tag, or goes to a kiosk within your organization, connects it with a USB cable, and it will be applied to the device. And if you want to do corporate liable devices, you can mass provision devices in this way, right? You don't have to go and boot the device and try to configure it for the user. You boot the device and touch an NFC tag, or you connect the device to a new USB cable, and the application or the configuration package is put down on the device, and the next time the user boots the device, he will automatically run through the process for provisioning and authentication, etc. So the device is configured. Well, is it a corporate liable scenario you talk about? Well, but they don't buy the device, right? Right. So, but you could unpackage the box if you want, or your mobile operator or your distributor, depending on where you buy, right, could get you the provisioning package from you and provision it on every device before they send it to a private address of the user or before you distribute it within the corporation. The moment they boot the device, it will go through the process. You can set in the configuration that they cannot remove the configuration package, yes. So you can lock that down. You can also lock it down afterwards, right, and reconfigure the device with MDM once it's in the hands of the users, and lock unenrollment, those kind of things, so they can't do anything you don't want them to do with the device. Obviously, in a bring your own, it's a different situation, but if it's a bring your own, they are motivated to get access to applications and email, etc., right? So they're motivated to walk up to an NFC tag, or they're motivated to walk up to a kiosk or whatever method you want to use to provision bring your own devices with this method. Now, we're also working very hard on VPN environments. Obviously, you want to be able to connect and include secure access to your environment from these mobile devices. VPN and Wi-Fi are probably the most used. You can provision all this with MDM and a provisioning package, but we're adding in Windows 10, across all Windows 10 versions, right, is the same VPN infrastructure, the same VPN framework or platform or whatever you want to call it, that enables per application VPN connections. You can define which applications are corporate applications. And hold that idea about corporate applications, but it's going to come back when I talk about EDP, or Enterprise Data Protection. You can define a corporate application and say the corporate application needs access over this tunnel, this port restrictions, etc., right? And whenever the user uses it, the VPN tunnel for that application fires up and the user can use it. It integrates with EDP, and I'll talk more about EDP in a minute, Enterprise Data Protection. And you can also set always on VPN. If you want to tunnel everything that the user is doing to your corporate network and maybe split it off at the entry point and say, oh, this is internet traffic, I don't want it on my corporate network, you go out, but all the other traffic comes in, or you want to check what the user is doing as such, right? You can set an always on VPN, lock it down so the user is always connected to a VPN environment. You can obviously allow the user to disconnect, but you can disallow the user to disconnect, right? A question?
Going back to what you mentioned before about the app manifest and the security around the mainstream application.
Mm-hmm.
Have you considered exposing this capability to the end user to select or to allow or disallow each application the rights that they're requesting through manifest? This would add some security because an application that wants network access, you don't need to give it network access. You can disable that.
Mm-hmm.
An application that wants
Yeah.
microphone access, you can disable that.
Yes, so there, yes and no. I'll answer the question. So whatever capabilities a application needs are published in the store. If you go in the store, you can find the details of what these are the application needs. And then there are a number of capabilities that the user needs to provide consent to, like location, for example, is one of those. So all the types of capabilities that interfere with privacy of the user will be able to consent or decline that capability of an application. An application is required to bring that up to the user at download, at install, and at first use, right? Not all capabilities are like that. We're not going to, if an application has 75 capabilities, but if you have, you were talking about network is not a capability that we necessarily ask the user to consent to at any point in time, right?
Right, I'm talking about overriding that consent because you might want an application, but you don't really want to do it.
Yes, as a user or as a corporation? Yes. Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a policy.
Yes. As a user, you have the option to decline some capabilities, but not all capabilities. And I don't think networking is specifically a capability that you can decline as a user at all. So it's managed by the MDM. It's very easy to deploy. It's the same profiles for desktops and laptops and mobile devices of any kind. It's integrated with your own, and then it also, all the plugins for the architecture are in the store. So there will be store plugins that need to be installed on the mobile devices as well as on desktops to be able to enable VPN. Now, from an app management perspective, if you are Juniper, or you are using Cisco, or whatever VPN infrastructure you're using, you'll be able to push that application down to the device. And if the vendor, like for example in Juniper's case, they often have the plugins on the gateway, right? You can install them directly from the gateway by site loading on a Windows mobile device. Again, it's MDM related, and I'll talk in a little bit about applications in a minute on how do you manage those as such. So let's talk about data protection, which is the next layer. How do we protect data on the device, right? We have secure access, we have a secure operating system, we need to protect the data on the device. All devices have BitLocker. It's generic, if I can call it, device encryption across the device. Right? You can set it on. The user can turn it on too, interactively, which is new in Windows 10 mobile devices. But BitLocker is always there. We will suspend the encryption keys on when the device is in sleep mode, right? So that hardware attacks, etc., are less easy to do, or it's less of a concern. Let's put it that way, right? And we encrypt every thing. It's MDM managed, etc. But it's generic encryption of the device, right? In addition to that, we are adding enterprise data protection for enterprise data only. It allows you to specify that the user, when he's using applications, is accessing stores, is using a network that you manage, etc., that all the data that is used by the user on his mobile device is additionally encrypted with a key that you own as a corporation and that is associated with the user's identity. This is available across the board for desktop as well as mobile devices. So when the user creates this trust relationship with the IDP, it gets the authentication codes and goes and is managed by the MDM will apply. And ADP is MDM dependent, right? Without a mobile device management system of your choice, you won't be able to apply EDP to a device, or enterprise data protection. The name is probably going to change, but at this point we call it enterprise data protection. You will have key management through the mobile device management system to encrypt the data, the documents, and the records that are being stored on the device. You will be able to specify the network and the locations, the storage locations that the user can access and can get information from, which means that if they store it somewhere else, it won't be possible, or when they store it encrypted on somewhere else, nobody else will be able to read it but that user, right? From his trusted device, not from an untrusted device, his home PC, for example. Right? The data always stays encrypted for the user to use. When the user stores a new document from a mobile device on a corporate storage location that you have defined, it will not be encrypted, because all the other users in your organization need to be able to read that document. Right? We'll only encrypt if it's stored on the device or on an unmanaged storage environment as such. Again, VPN locks into that, all those other things. Yes, you have a question? Mm-hmm. Yes, it's possible, right? We do not encrypt the SD card when it comes to data that is being stored on. There's no BitLocker for SD cards, right? But if there are corporate data stored on the SD card that is inserted into a device, they will be encrypted, because it's an EDP level encryption that is on that. When you remove the SD card and put it into another PC, if that is the user's PC, right? Only when it is the user's PC, he will be able to read it. If you put it in another device, nobody will be able to read it. I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm not sure I follow you. So the thing we do not do BitLocker on an SD card. When you install an app on the SD card, we don't use BitLocker on the SD card. Yes. No, we use EDP. Yes. If you store a document from Word, for example, a corporate document on the SD card, it will be encrypted using EDP, not BitLocker. Encrypted, yes. I'm sorry,
When I pull out the SD card and decrypt data on the SD card,
Well, if you pull out the SD card of a phone that has an EDP, and yes, if you pull out the SD card from a phone that has an encrypted file on it, and you put it in another PC that is not trusted and doesn't have the user's identity, the document will not, you will not be able to decrypt the document. Well, I'm not sure. You're probably talking about some attack that you can do on that SD card to try to decrypt the data, right? Is that what you're talking about? If not, let's park it and let's talk offline. I'm more than happy to talk through it. You can block an SD card, obviously, right? You can remove the capability of the user to insert and use SD cards in a mobile device. So when ADP is applied, you specify what applications are enterprise applications. All the other ones are personal applications. They won't use this encryption mechanism. And in the middle, you can specify, or you can use what we call unlighted applications, right? Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, excuse me, Market, the store, are all unlighted applications. They know about EDP. If EDP is applied to the device, these applications will comply with all EDP environments. A consumer application, if it's not a corporate application, will never be able to open anything on the device that is protected with EDP, that belongs to the enterprise container. Yes?
If an application is tagged as a corporate application, let's say for work, and we, as a user, we also personal file
I didn't follow your full question. If an application like Word, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. Word is a enlightened application. It knows about EDP. It knows about sources of documents and targets of documents, etc. So if the document is an enterprise document, it will be encrypted. If the user wants to do his shopping list in Word, he can still do his shopping list in Word. Right? So when you really create a new document on a phone, right, there will be a pop-up telling you, hey, you're creating a new document. Is this a business document or is it a personal document? If the user chooses for personal, it will not be encrypted. Right? You will have to speak up. I don't hear. We will provide viewers for those platforms in the first phase. So you'll be able to view those applications. You will have to, from within the application, the viewer log in and provide your credentials, so you can view the documents. Now, if the iOS device is accessing an internal storage area where the same document is, right, they will be able to, because the internal storage is not encrypted. It's a at the server, the document will not be encrypted. The document will only be encrypted outside of your network on the device, right? Or if the user mails it to somebody that is outside of your organization, it will be encrypted. And those are all the policies you can set, right? And there is obviously override. The users sometimes can override if you allow them, but that will generate auditable events for you that you can see as we went just a little bit ago into our MDM system. You could see there was an event option there that will show the auditable events that are EDP related, right? An auditable event is like this, right? The user uses OneNote, wants to copy something from OneNote, right? He copies it, goes to another application, in this case Word, but it could be a Twitter application, for example, right? Where the user wants to tweet something that he has in a OneNote. And at that point in time, when the user say paste, it will get a pop-up saying, do you really want to paste this? Because this is corporate information. And the user can say paste anyway. That will generate an auditable event that will go to the MDM server so you can follow if users are doing this. You can block this, right? You can completely block copy and paste between corporate applications and personal applications. So the user cannot do that. They will never see it. The paste will just not work. It will get a pop-up saying this is corporate data. You cannot paste this in a personal environment. MDM, as you saw in the configuration provider, will be able to enroll, generate or find information on devices. You can follow it, set a number of policies for Wi-Fi, VPN, OneFU, right? And then also manage the apps, which we'll dive into in a minute. And then also remotely wipe, enterprise wipe, lock, pin reset, find the phone, lock the phone when the phone is lost or stolen in the way that it cannot be reset and resold, right? And then unenroll devices from your MDM and Azure AD environment as such. So what we're doing with Windows 10 for mobile as well as for desktop is we're adding a third layer. Users can still buy applications in the store using their Live ID for personal use, right? They can still do that. And they can still do an purely MDM-driven environment where the user goes through your MDM catalog to download applications and sometimes deep link into the Windows Store to get to these applications. But obviously, in Windows 8.1, you didn't have any control over these store applications. With Windows 10, we're adding the middle piece, right, the business store, that enables you to go into the Windows Store with an Azure corporate Azure AD, right? And register as a buyer or a selector. There are different roles you can register for. You can purchase applications in the store for your user or purchase free applications for the users. And in that case, create a store in the store that users will see in their store app on the phone and be able to install these applications. There are basically two scenarios. One is an online store. We host everything for you, right? You go in, you register, you select and buy applications with a PO or a credit card or whatever is applicable. You create a private category in the store, the Contoso category, right? You put all these applications in there, and now the users can download them. If they're for-pay applications, they don't have to pay. You own the license for those apps. When the users leave your organization, you unenroll them from MDM and Azure AD, their apps get disabled on their phone too. They won't be able to run those apps again. And you will get the license back, and you can use that specific license for another user. The user will obviously see the apps in the store app on the phone, the standard store app, right? Be able to see, hey, there is Contoso, there are the apps for Contoso. I'm going to install one of those apps. I'm going to use one of those apps as such. It's all cloud-based. There's no on-premise infrastructure needed. You need to register for it, and you can actually also upload your own applications in your store, in the store scenario, right? If you create your own applications for your users, upload them in the store, and they will be your applications that your users will see in that store, in the store. You also have a Mobile device management integrated scenario where you do the same thing. You purchase the applications in the store, select them for your user, but now say, make them available in my MDM system. And again, we're working with all the MDM vendors. This will be possible in Intune as well as with AirWatch, MobileIron, etc. Right? You integrate them into your MDM system as such, or make them available to your MDM system, and you can disable the store app on the phone and make the MDM app available on the phone. So users will go into the MDM app to select those applications and install them on your devices. You can make these applications required, store applications, right? And push them to the device. If the user registers with the MDM, these applications will automatically be pushed to the user's device, right? From the store. You have a question?
For the business apps, do they have to go through the whole certification process still?
No. So if in the business apps, you mean your line of business app that you develop for your user, in both cases, when you upload them into the store, they will go through a light certification process that is redesigned for line of business apps, right? It doesn't go to the regular public applications certification. If you don't want them in the store and you want to use MDM, you develop your app, you upload them into your MDM system, and you distribute them that way. You're responsible for the quality and the performance and et cetera, right? Fix your own bugs, it's called. Right. And so users will be available. There are APIs available for ISVs to make this easier, the licensing and the distribution of apps. This mechanism also allows you to download apps from the store, right? To bring them down into your environment, include them in a provisioning package that with the configuration designer that I showed before. So service them offline. If you have a handheld scenario, right? A factory floor scenario where you don't have internet access all the time. You have just corporate access. You can create a provisioning package with the applications from the store that you have licensed and deploy them to that device. Could be, I don't know, a calculator or whatever, right? That's needed on the factory floor, that type of solutions. And again, you have control over the licenses, the packages, and the distribution of it. One thing that's going to get easier if you develop your own apps, you can still do a VeriSign, we call it Symantec. Was a VeriSign, right? Symantec certificate to sign your own apps. Or if you already have a signing certificate that has a root on the device, or you are able to deploy a root certificate to the device, you're willing, I should say, most people are able, but willing to deploy a root certificate to a device, you can use your own certificates for that. But the root has to be on the device, otherwise the device will not trust the app that is signed with your certificate. And then the Edge browser, from an app perspective, is the only browser on a modern mobile device. It doesn't have IE, right? Just Edge or Spartan. And it's the only browser there. You can configure it. There are MDM policies to configure it. These MDM policies are aligned with the desktop, right? If you have on a desktop IE11 as well as Edge, the same policies apply, as well as these policies also apply to the Edge on the phone policy. This is the first set of policies. We will be adding more Edge type of policies to the Windows. As we service Windows over time, we'll be adding more of those as we go forward. So it basically brings it all together, right? From secure hardware to a trusted operating system, to access control with identities and hello, through data protection with EDP, BitLocker, VPN, all those kind of policies that you can set into one environment, and then distribute applications in the same environment that run in their own sandbox, are protected from each other. You have policies on data sharing between applications, etc. So making both a bring your own scenario as a corporate liable scenario, you buy phones for your users scenario, right? A much more feasible scenario on Windows mobile devices. Any questions? Go ahead. Yes.
Are you guys working with DoD certifications?
Yes.
FOC?
So today we have FIPS and so forth for 8.1, and we'll do the same for 10.
First step. What about beyond that? So ultimately getting to full operational capability.
You mean like common criteria and so forth? Those are all in the plans for Windows 10. So doing FIPS certification and common criteria, and then difficult for me to talk about our relationship with DoD, et cetera, as a customer, right? Because that's a private, but we're also working at that point on Windows 10 with those organizations. So we'll see more certification. We'll also do certification in other countries. European countries have different approaches, right? And yes, we'll do all that. Other questions? Feedback? Are we on the right path? You have a question, sir.
Yeah, with data separation of EDP, I think you called it.
Yes.
Is that going to be possible with using the Office apps on an iOS device, for example?
Well, as the other gentleman was asking, right? We'll have view capabilities in the first phase for other platforms like Android and iOS to view those documents, not to have the full editing and write back and encryption capabilities. But we are working on that at a later stage. But in the first stage, it will be viewing capabilities of those documents on the other platforms.
Will it be possible to manage that through a non-Microsoft MDM?
Yes. AirWatch, Mobile Iron, I don't know which vendor you are. Yeah. So yes, we're working with the guys from AirWatch on that.
Great, thank you.
Got another question again on the same? I'm not sure. What do you mean with an out-of-process viewer?
I mean, if viewer is launched and it's not my process,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that it's switching to a different app effectively.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Let's start with the first one. If it's a corporate, if you're talking about the corporate data that is on the device, you will have a backup in your storage as such. You can also set up backup for devices separately. Didn't talk about that at all, but you can do that through your MDM system. Then if the user leaves the organization, you can wipe or corporate wipe the device, right? Meaning you remove the Azure AD identity and the MDM enrollment from the device. It will automatically also remove all the certificates and documents and applications and settings and etc. from the device automatically and securely wipe that from the device as such, right? So does that answer your question? There is that possibility. There is always a possibility that somebody will break an encryption system. So, right, we're designing it good, but it will never be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect in security, right? So, yes, it will let's call it very difficult. Yes. Other questions? Okay. Let's start with that gentleman. I'll come to you then.
For 7-inch devices, tablets running Windows 8.1, what's the upgrade scenario in terms of user settings, data, apps?
Well, it's an upgrade. And if we're talking about a Windows 8.1 device going to Windows 10, a phone, right? It's a backup, upgrade, restore of the environment. The HP 7 is kind of, I'm using it as a mobile device under a mobile scenario, but I'm not sure it will have the mobile version of Windows 10 for the HP7. The reason for that, it needs the back button and it needs the search button, which are required buttons. Now you can generate those in software, but that depends on the OEM. If the OEM is going to deliver that specific driver functionality, you'll be able to upgrade those devices. Now, when the HP7 has a compressed OS and those kind of things, the way I did it is just re-image the device, to be honest. Sir?
So the term BitLocker in this context seems to be used as a generic term or generic brand term for board drive encryption. It's not the same as the MDOC version of BitLocker that we see. These seem to be two different concepts.
Well, let's put it that way. You're right, but the term BitLocker as a brand name, right, is evolving within Microsoft to cover more than just generic drive encryption. It also includes the MDOP functionality for the manageability of BitLocker, and it will also include some other functionalities that's encryption related. We'll use the BitLocker name for that. The way I spoke about it today, I spoke about it as device encryption functionality, right? I didn't include some of the other ones. I'm not the one who should be disclosing things.
Okay, so are there any management capabilities for this flavor of BitLocker?
From a key managed perspective, I'm not in a position to talk about it at this point. Well, I understand what you're asking, so, but, yeah.
These MDM capabilities, do they require Microsoft's MDM solution?
No. You can use another MDM system. The APIs are available on MSDN today for Windows 10, right? And we are working in a program with most of the leading MDM vendors like Mobileyeron, AirWatch, Afaria, which is SAP. Yes, and they are already working on their solution for Windows 10. Question? No, it can be enhanced with IRM, right? You can use IRM for across organizations, for example. And IRM, which is part of EMS, Enterprise Mobility Suite, can be used to extend your EDP infrastructure to a partner organization, for example, right? So it's going to be integrated.
But you don't need to have it implemented.
You don't need IRM to integrate, to use EDP, but you can extend EDP with IRM. Will provisioning include apps? And say again? In provisioning, you can distribute apps with provisioning, right?
Provisioning, whether we can distribute 3 set of apps, for example, and corporate will have 4 to 5 apps, whether that can be distributed.
Yes, you can use your corporate apps that you have developed yourself and provision them with a provisioning package or distribute them with MDM.
Even store apps.
Store apps that you download from the store, as well as your own apps that you have developed and signed yourself. You can provision them within a provisioning package or distribute them with MDM. Both scenarios will be supported.
So the user will, with the user, switching on the device for the first time, he will be having enterprise apps.
Yes,
Also the store apps.
also store apps. Yeah. All right. Thank you. I'm still available for other questions. Do an eval if you find the time, and I'll appreciate it. Thank you. But if you have more questions, just come up to me.